Jake Morrison sat quietly in his chair at the massive council table. Around him, dozens of alien voices filled the air with angry words. The Galactic Council chamber was huge, with walls that reached so high they seemed to touch the stars. Jake felt small in this place, not because of the size, but because of what was happening. For 3 months now, the council members had been making new rules about humans. Rules that would stop them from building new colonies. Rules that would limit how many ships they could have. Rules that would control where humans could go in space. Every day brought more restrictions, more limits, more ways to keep humanity. Locked in a small corner of the galaxy, Jake had tried to speak against these rules many times. He had explained why humans needed to expand, why they needed to explore, why limiting them was dangerous for everyone. But the other council members never really listened. They just saw humans as too aggressive, too fast, too different. The Zenthari. Representative Vexthera stood tall on her 6 legs. Her insect-like head turned toward the other delegates as she spoke in her clicking voice. Humans expand too quickly. They take too much. We must control them before they become a threat. To all of us. Several other aliens nodded their agreement. The fish-like Aquarian delegate Merkala waved her fins in support. Her voice bubbled through the water-filled speaking device attached to her chair. Yes, humans are dangerous. They fight too much. They argue too much. Peace comes when we limit their power. Jake watched all of this happen. He had been Earth's voice in this council for 5 years. He had made friends here, or so he thought. He had helped solve problems between different species. He had worked to make trade agreements that helped everyone. But now he could see the truth. These aliens were not his friends. They were afraid of humans, and fear made them want to hurt what they did not understand. The crystalline being called Shardake made a sound like wind chimes. When translated, its words were cold and logical. Its mathematical analysis shows human expansion rate exceeds safe parameters. Restriction protocols must be implemented to maintain galactic stability. More nodding. More agreement. Jake felt something break inside his chest. It was not anger exactly. It was something deeper. It was the feeling of being completely alone in a room full of people who were supposed to be on your side. Growths, Neth, from the Feline Coalition, spoke next. His cat-like features showed satisfaction as he purred his words. The motion to restrict human military vessels passes with majority vote. Humans may maintain no more than 50 armed ships in all of space.
50
ships. Jake almost laughed, but it would have been a bitter sound. Humanity had over 300 colonies spread across dozens of star systems. 50 ships could not protect even half of them. The Council knew this. They wanted to leave human settlements defenseless. Jake looked around the table one more time. He had spent years learning the languages of these beings. He had studied their cultures, their histories, their fears and hopes. He had worked to bridge the gap between humanity and the rest of the galaxy. He had believed that understanding could overcome fear. He had been wrong. Jake stood up slowly. His movement was quiet, but in the large chamber, even small sounds carried far. A few delegates glanced his way, but most continued their discussion about the next set of restrictions they wanted to place on humanity. Jake reached into his jacket, pulled out his translation device. It was a small silver box that had allowed him to speak with every species in the Council. Without it, he was just another alien making sounds they could not understand. He looked at the device for a moment, remembering all the conversations it had made possible, all the agreements it had helped create, all the friendships he thought it had built. Then he placed it gently on the table. The small click of metal on stone seemed louder than all the alien voices combined. But still, most of the council members paid no attention. They were too busy planning how to cage humanity. Jake began walking toward the exit. His footsteps echoed in the vast chamber. Now a few more delegates looked up. Vexthera paused in her speech about limiting human mining rights. Her compound eyes followed Jake's movement. "Where does the human think he is going?" she asked, her voice carrying clearly through her translator. Jake could not answer. Without his translation device, his words would just be noise to them. But perhaps that was fitting. His words had been meaningless to them, even when they could understand them. Jake reached the massive doors that led out of the council chamber. They were made of some alien metal that shifted colors. In the light, beautiful, like everything else in this place. Beautiful and cold. He turned back to face the council one last time. Dozens of alien faces looked back at him, some curious, some annoyed, some completely indifferent. These beings represented hundreds of worlds and billions of lives. They made decisions that affected entire star systems. They had just decided that humanity was too dangerous to be free. Jake pulled out his personal communicator. It was a simple device, nothing like the advanced technology that ran the council chambers. But it connected him to every human ship, station, and colony in known space. It connected him to home. He pressed the activation button and spoke clearly into the device. This is Ambassador Morrison to all human colonies, stations, and vessels. Execute Protocol Omega. We are going home. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Jake had never used those words before. Most humans had never heard them. But every human military commander knew what they meant. Every colony administrator had the orders locked away in secure files. Every ship captain had been briefed on what to do if those words were ever spoken. Protocol Omega meant that humanity was no longer welcome in the galaxy. It meant that every human settlement, every human ship, every human presence in space was to be withdrawn immediately. It meant going back to Earth and never coming out again. The alien delegates stared at Jake in confusion. They had no idea what Protocol Omega meant. They did not know that in speaking those words, Jake had just ordered the largest evacuation in galactic history. Jake looked at them one more time. These beings who thought they knew what was best for humanity. These creatures who believed that fear was the same thing as wisdom. These aliens who had just made the biggest mistake in the history of their council. You wanted us gone, Jake said quietly, knowing they could not understand him without his translator. No, you will get your wish. Jake Morrison walked out of the Galactic Council chamber. The massive doors closed behind him with a sound like thunder. He did not look back. There was nothing left to see. In the chamber behind him, the delegates sat in stunned silence for a moment. Then Vexthera clicked, her mandibles dismissively. Good, one less problem to deal with. Now we can continue with the restrictions on human trade routes. The council returned to their discussion, completely unaware that they had just lost the most valuable member they would ever have. They did not know that humanity's departure would cost them more than they could possibly imagine. They would learn. Soon enough, Jake walked through the halls of the council building, his footsteps echoing in the empty corridors. His communicator buzzed with acknowledgments from human commanders across the galaxy. The evacuation had begun. Protocol Omega was, in effect, humanity was going home. And this time, they would not be coming back. Captain Lisa Wright stood on the bridge of the UES Navigator, watching the empty planet below. 3 weeks had passed since Ambassador Morrison's message had reached every corner of human space. 3 weeks since Protocol Omega had begun. Now Lisa was seeing the results for the first time. New Montana had been one of humanity's most successful colonies. 50,000 people had lived and worked on this world, mining precious metals and growing food in vast greenhouse farms. The planet had been a symbol of human determination. Turning a harsh desert world into something green and alive, now it was empty. Captain, I'm reading power sources all across the surface, reported Lieutenant Tom Parker from his station. Fusion reactors are still running. Life support systems are active. Even the streetlights are on. Lisa nodded but said nothing. She had expected this. Protocol Omega was not about destruction. It was about departure. Clean, complete, and permanent.
Hey.
Take us down to the main settlement, Lisa ordered. I want to see this with my own eyes. The navigator descended through New Montana's thin atmosphere. Below them, the city of New Hope spread out like a miniature Earth city. Buildings reached toward the sky, parks dotted the landscape with green, and roads connected everything in a neat grid pattern. It looked exactly like a thriving human colony should look, except there were no people anywhere. The ship landed at the main spaceport. Lisa suited up and walked out onto the landing pad with a small team. The air was breathable, kept clean by atmospheric processors that hummed quietly in the distance. The temperature was comfortable. It's maintained by climate control systems that still functioned perfectly. Dr. Sam Parker, the ship's science officer, checked his scanner as they walked toward the city center. "Captain, this is incredible. Every system is running at optimal levels. The automated factories are still producing goods. The farms are still growing crops. It's like the colonists just vanished into thin air." They walked down Main Street past shops and restaurants and offices. Through the windows, Lisa could see that everything had been left in perfect order. No signs of panic or rush, no broken glass or scattered belongings. The humans who lived here had simply packed up their personal items and left everything else. Behind in the town square, they found a monument that had been erected just before the evacuation. It was a simple stone pillar, with words carved into it in several languages. The English version read, "To whoever finds this place, these buildings and machines are yours now. We built them to last. Use them well. The people of New Montana." Lisa felt a strange pride mixed with sadness as she read those words. Even in leaving, humans had thought about others. "Captain," called Sergeant Danny Cruz from across the square. "You need to see this." He was standing in front of the colony's administration building. The doors were open, and inside they could see the main computer terminal was still active. A message played on repeat on the screen. "Colony evacuation complete. All residents safely relocated. Infrastructure transferred to Galactic Council. Authority. Thank you for letting us call this place home." Lisa shook her head. Even after being forced to leave, the colonists had been polite. They spent the rest of the day exploring New Montana. Every building told the same story. Humans had left behind everything they had built, everything they had created, everything. They had worked for a bit. They had taken with them something much more valuable: their knowledge, their skills, and their determination. When they returned to the Navigator, Lisa found messages waiting from other survey teams. The reports were all the same. New Berlin, humanity's second largest colony, was empty but intact. The mining station at Kepler Point had been abandoned, with all equipment still running. Trade depots throughout human space showed signs of hasty but organized evacuation. "How many people are we talking about, Sam?" Lisa asked her science officer. Dr. Parker consulted his tablet. "Based on the size of these settlements and the capacity of the facilities, I estimate at least 12 million colonists were relocated. In less than 3 weeks? That's not including military personnel and space station crews. 12 million people," Lisa repeated. Where did they all go? It was the question that was starting to worry the Galactic Council. Reports were flooding. In from across known space, human colonies empty, human ships gone, human trade routes abandoned. It was as if humanity had simply disappeared from the galaxy. But Lisa knew better. Humanity had not disappeared. It had gone somewhere else. The Navigator continued its survey mission, visiting 6 more former human colonies over the next week. Each one told the same story: clean evacuation, functioning infrastructure, and no clues about where the people had gone. It was at the 7th colony, New Texas, that they found something different. New Texas had been humanity's newest colony, established only 2 years earlier. It was smaller than the others, with only 5,000 residents. But it had been important because it sat on the edge of unexplored space, serving as a jumping-off point for human exploration missions. When the Navigator arrived, they found the colony empty like all the others. But here, they also found something else. Deep space sensors, much more advanced than anything the colony had possessed before, were still active and scanning the void beyond known space. "Captain, these sensors are incredible," Dr. Parker reported. "They're picking up energy signatures from systems we've never even cataloged. And the technology, I've never seen anything like it." Lisa studied the sensor data. The readings showed massive energy sources in the deep void, far beyond where any civilization should be able to survive. The signatures were consistent with large-scale construction projects and advanced propulsion systems. "Sam, how long would it take to build sensor arrays this sophisticated?" she asked. "With current technology, years, maybe decades. But Captain, these weren't built with current technology. This is at least 2 generations ahead of anything in our databases. Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. Are you saying humans built this? I'm saying someone did. And whoever it was, they have capabilities we didn't know existed. The navigators spent another day at New Texas studying the sensor arrays and trying to understand what they were seeing. The more they learned, the more questions they had. The energy signatures from deep space were not random. They showed patterns, organization, and scale that suggested massive construction projects. Someone was building something out there in the void, something big. When they finally left New Texas, Lisa was troubled by what they had found. She sent a coded message back to Earth, reporting their discoveries to the human military command that still maintained a presence in the Sol system. The reply came, "Back quickly. Continue survey mission. Report all findings. Do not attempt contact with deep space signatures." Lisa understood. Earth wanted to know what had happened to the colonies, but they were not ready to reveal what humanity was really doing out there in the dark. Over the following days, similar reports came in from other survey teams. Advanced sensor networks found at abandoned colonies. Evidence of technological developments that should have been impossible. And always, those mysterious energy signatures coming from the void between the stars. The Galactic Council was starting to notice too. Emergency sessions were being called. Diplomatic missions were being launched to try to contact Earth. But Earth's responses were polite and unhelpful. Yes, the colonies had been evacuated. No, they would not say where the colonists had gone. Yes, humanity was still interested in peaceful relations. No, they would not be returning to their former territories. Meanwhile, reports began filtering in of other changes. The Pirate Nebula, which had been kept clear by human patrol ships, was becoming dangerous again. Merchant vessels were disappearing. Trade routes that humans had maintained were becoming unreliable, and in the Galactic Council chambers, the first voices of doubt began to be heard. "Perhaps we acted too hastily," whispered Councillor Melandra from the Peaceful Coalition. But Council Leader Vexathara would hear none of it. "Humans are gone. Good. Now we can have peace without their interference." She had no idea how wrong. Humanity was not gone. They were simply somewhere else, building something that would change the galaxy forever, and they were doing it beyond the reach of those who had driven them away. 6 months had passed since the humans left, and the Galactic Council was beginning to understand what they had lost. The first real crisis came when the Zephyrian Confederacy and the Metallic Synthesis started fighting over the border systems near the Amber Nebula. It was a small dispute at first, just disagreements about mining rights in an asteroid field. But small disputes had a way of becoming big wars if nobody stopped them early. In the past, this would have been easy to solve. Human mediator Carl Johnson would have arrived within days, bringing Earth's strange talent for finding solutions that made everyone happy. Carl had a gift for talking to people, for understanding what they really wanted beneath all their angry words. But Carl was gone now. Along with all the other humans, Council Leader Vexthera tried to handle the situation herself. She sent messages to both sides, demanding they stop fighting and return to their original borders. This was how the Zinthari always solved problems, with commands and threats. It did not work. The Zephyrians were a proud species who lived in floating cities above their gas giant worlds. They saw Vexthera's demands as insults to their honor. The Metallic Synthesis were artificial beings who thought in pure logic. They saw the threats as irrelevant to the mathematical facts of the situation. Within a week, the small border dispute had become shooting between patrol ships. Counselor Shardake tried next, offering mathematical solutions that would divide the disputed territory exactly in half. The crystalline being's logic was perfect, but logic alone could not heal wounded pride or address the real needs of both sides. The Zephyrians needed the rare gases found in the nebula to maintain their floating cities. Metallic Synthesis needed the heavy metals in the asteroids to build new members of their species. Neither side could give up what they needed to survive. The Aquarian delegate, Mercola, attempted to use emotional appeals, speaking of the need for peace and understanding between all species. Her words were beautiful and moving, but they did not change the basic facts that were driving the conflict. By the end of the month, 3 star systems were involved in the fighting. Ships were being destroyed. Lives were being lost. The situation was spiraling out of control. "Where are those stubborn humans when we actually need them?" Counselor Carnth muttered to his assistant after another failed negotiation session. The words were spoken quietly, but they reflected what many council members were beginning to think. Humans had been annoying sometimes, always asking difficult questions and refusing to accept simple answers. But they had also been effective at solving problems that seemed impossible. Carl Johnson would have sat down with both sides and asked them what they really needed. Then he would have found a way to give it to them. Maybe he would have suggested the Zephyrians provide protection services for synthesis, mining operations in exchange for a steady supply of processed metals. Maybe he would have proposed joint research stations that could benefit both species. Whatever solution he found, it would have worked because humans understood something the other species did not. They understood that the best answers were not always the obvious ones. The fighting continued for 3 more weeks before a shaky ceasefire was finally arranged. Both sides agreed to stop shooting, but neither side was happy. The underlying problems had not been solved. Everyone knew the fighting would start again soon. But the border war was not the only problem facing the galaxy. The infamous pirate nebula had become a hunting ground again. For years, human patrol ships commanded by officers like Commander Rick Stone had kept the space lanes clear. The pirates were still there, hiding in the nebula's gas clouds, but they had been afraid to attack while human warships were watching. Now the human ships were gone. The pirates were getting bold again. Merchant Captain Nexvala of the Trading Guild was the first to die. His cargo ship was attacked while carrying medical supplies to the outer colonies. The pirates took everything and left no survivors. Within a month, 6 more ships had been lost. Trade through the region slowed as merchants chose longer, safer routes. The cost of goods began to rise throughout the galaxy as shipping became more expensive and dangerous. The Galactic Council tried to organize joint patrols to replace the human presence, but it was not easy. Different species had different ideas about ship design, different communication systems, different tactical approaches. The Zenthari wanted to use overwhelming force. The Aquarians preferred non-lethal methods. The Shardak insisted on mathematical precision in all operations. Nothing worked as well as the simple, direct approach the humans had used. Meanwhile, other problems were appearing throughout former human space. Mining operations that humans had managed were producing half as much, or at twice the cost. Agricultural stations that had used human techniques were struggling with crop failures. Research facilities were making slower progress without human scientists to ask the right questions. Dr. Emma Rice had developed new mining methods that increased efficiency by 40% while reducing environmental damage.
Ow!
But Dr. Price was gone, and the detailed records she had left behind were difficult for other species to understand and apply. Human agricultural expert Ben Foster had created crop rotation systems that worked perfectly on dozens of different worlds. But without Ben to explain the subtle variations needed for each planet's unique conditions, many of the farms were failing. Trade Minister Holvax of the Commercial Union tried to hide his concern as he reviewed the latest economic reports. Production was down across the galaxy. Shipping costs were up. Several trade routes had been abandoned entirely due to pirate activity. "We can manage without them," he told his staff. But his mandibles clicked nervously as he spoke. The numbers told a different story. The galaxy's economy was slowly falling apart without human participation. At the next council session, the problems could no longer be ignored. "The situation in the Pirate Nebula is getting worse," reported Admiral Krexler of the Defense Alliance. "We've lost 12 merchant vessels in the past month. The pirates are using tactics we haven't seen before, and our joint patrol efforts are not effective." Councillor Melandra from the Peaceful Coalition spoke next. Production reports from the former human territories show continued decline. Mining output is down 30%. Agricultural yield is down 25%. Several research projects have been abandoned due to lack of progress. The council chamber was quieter than usual as the members absorbed this information. These were not small problems that could be ignored or explained away. These were fundamental issues that affected the entire galactic community. Council leader Vexithera tried to maintain her confident facade. These are temporary setbacks. We will adapt. We'll find new solutions. The galaxy managed perfectly well before humans arrived, and we will manage perfectly well now that they are gone. But privately, even Vexithera was beginning to have doubts. The humans had been involved in galactic affairs for less than 50 years, but somehow they had become essential to the way everything worked. Their absence was being felt in ways nobody had anticipated. Counselor Corinth raised a question that many were thinking, but few dared to speak. Has anyone been able to locate where the humans went? Perhaps we could open negotiations, discuss the possibility of their return. The chamber fell silent. Several attempts had been made to track down humanity's new location, but all had failed. The humans had not just left known space, they had vanished completely. Our long-range sensors have detected no trace of human activity, reported the chief science officer. It is as if 12 million people simply disappeared from the galaxy. But that was not entirely true. There had been reports, vague, unconfirmed reports of strange energy signatures in the deep void, of massive construction projects in regions where no civilization should be able to survive, of technology that seemed decades ahead of anything in the galactic databases. The council members did not know what to make of these reports. It seemed impossible, but then again, so did the complete disappearance of 12 million humans. As the session ended, many of the delegates found themselves thinking the same thought. Maybe driving away humanity had been a mistake, but none of them were ready to admit it out loud. Not yet. 1 year after humanity's disappearance, the Galactic Council finally decided they had to find out where the humans had gone. The problems in the galaxy were getting worse every day, and some council members were starting to whisper that they needed human help to fix things. Council leader Vexithera was not ready to admit the council had made a mistake, but she could not ignore the reality of their situation. The economy was struggling. Pirates controlled major shipping routes, and conflicts between member species were happening more often. We need to know what the humans are doing, she announced at an emergency session. Are they planning something? Are they a threat? We must have answers. Fleet Commander Zixara was chosen to lead the search mission. He was a respected military officer from the Draconian Empire, known for his careful planning and steady nerves. If anyone could find humanity and determine their intentions, it would be him. The search fleet consisted of 12 ships from 6 different species. They had the best sensors available, the fastest engines, and enough supplies for a year long. Mission. Their orders were simple. Find humanity and report back on what they discovered. The fleet began by following the faint traces left by human evacuation ships. The energy signatures were old and weak, but they pointed toward a region of space known as the Void Sector. This was an area that most species avoided, a place where gravitational anomalies made navigation dangerous, and where few resources existed to support life. Why would they go there? It's Dr. Telemic, the fleet's chief scientist.
The Void
Sector is considered uninhabitable. Nothing can survive in that region. Commander Zixara studied the star charts carefully. Maybe that was the point. If you want to disappear completely, you go where no one expects to find you. The journey to the Void Sector took 3 weeks. As they traveled deeper into the region, the ship's sensors began picking up strange readings. Space itself seemed different here, twisted in ways that made instruments give confusing results. Navigator Peljosh worked constantly to keep the fleet on course. Commander, the gravitational fields in this region are not natural. Something has been ... altered. Altered how? Zixara asked. I'm not sure. It's like someone has been reshaping space itself, creating stable pathways through areas that should be impassable. As they continued deeper into the Void Sector, the readings became even stranger. What had initially appeared to be empty space was revealing signs of massive artificial structures, energy signatures that should not exist, technology that defied understanding. Dr. Telemic stared at his instruments in disbelief. Commander, these readings, they're impossible. I'm detecting construction on a scale I've never seen before. Structures that are larger than entire star systems. Are you certain? Zixara asked. The energy output alone would require technology decades ahead of anything in our databases. In the scope of the construction, it's like they're building an entire civilization from scratch. The fleet pressed on, following the energy signatures deeper into the void. What they found there changed everything they thought they knew about humanity. Massive space stations floated in the darkness, one larger than the biggest cities in Council space. Artificial worlds had been constructed around dead stars, their surfaces glowing with the light of fusion reactors and atmospheric processors. Ships moved between these installations, ships of designs that no Council member had ever seen before. "Is this possible?" whispered Navigator Peljosh. "They've been gone for only 1 year. How could they build all of this in such a short time?" Dr. Telemic was running calculations on his computer, checking and rechecking his results. "According to my analysis, what we're seeing represents more construction than the entire Galactic Council has accomplished in the past century. The resources alone. Where did they get the materials for projects this massive?" Commander Zixara was beginning to understand something that made him very uncomfortable. Maybe they didn't build all of this in the past year. Maybe they've been preparing for a long time. The implications of that statement hung in the air like a dark cloud. If humans had been planning their departure and building these installations while still participating in the Galactic Council, what else had they been hiding? The fleet tried to get closer to examine the human installations more carefully. But they quickly discovered that approach was impossible. An invisible barrier surrounded the entire region, not a physical wall, but some kind of energy field. That prevented their ships from moving forward. "It's not hostile," reported the tactical officer. "We're not being attacked or damaged. We simply cannot proceed beyond this point." Commander Zixara tried opening communication channels, broadcasting on all frequencies that humans had previously used. For hours, there was no response. Then, finally, a message appeared on their screens. The text was simple and direct. "You are in restricted space. State your purpose." Zixara broadcast back. "This is Fleet Commander Zixara of the Galactic Council. Exploration Fleet. We seek diplomatic contact with human representatives." A response came quickly. "Diplomatic contact requires formal appointment through proper channels. Submit your request through established protocols." "What established protocols?" Zixara asked. "There are no current diplomatic channels between the Council and humanity." A long silence followed. "Then, that is correct. There are no diplomatic channels." The communication ended there. No matter how many times the fleet tried to re-establish contact, there was no further response. For 3 days, the fleet remained at the barrier, studying what they could see of human space from their position. The more they observed, the more impressive and disturbing the human achievement became. The artificial worlds they had built were not just functional, they were beautiful. Gardens and parks could be seen from space, along with cities that seemed to blend perfectly with their engineered environments. The space stations were architectural marvels that combined practical design with artistic vision. Most importantly, the scale of human activity suggested a population much larger than the 12 million colonists who had evacuated from Council space. Where did all these people come from? Dr. Telemic wondered aloud. Even if every human in known space had come here, there wouldn't be enough people to operate installations this large. Navigator Peljosh had been studying the traffic patterns between human installations. "Commander, I've been tracking ship movements for the past 2 days. Based on the number of vessels I've observed, I estimate the human population in this region at 50 to 60 million people."
"Ow."
"That's impossible," Zixara replied. "There were never more than 15 million humans in total throughout the galaxy. Then either my calculations are wrong, or humanity has been hiding a lot more than we realized." The fleet spent another week at the barrier, gathering as much information as possible. They recorded energy signatures, ship designs, communication, frequencies, and anything else that might be useful to the Council. But they were not able to make direct contact with any human representatives. On their final day in the region, something unexpected happened. A single human ship approached the barrier from the inside. It was sleek and elegant. It's clearly built with technology far in advance of anything the Council possessed. The ship stopped just on the other side of the barrier and opened a communication channel. Council fleet, you have observed our space for sufficient time. You will now depart and report your findings to your superiors. Commander Zixura tried to extend the conversation. We would welcome the opportunity to discuss renewed relations between humanity and the Council. The human response was polite but firm. The Human Federation appreciates the Council's interest. However, we are not currently accepting diplomatic overtures. Please depart our space. Human Federation, Zixura asked. Is that what you call yourselves now? Among other things? Safe travels, Commander. The human ship turned and disappeared back into their territory, leaving the Council fleet alone at the barrier. As they began their journey home, members of the expedition were quiet and thoughtful. They'd found humanity, but what they had discovered raised more questions than it answered. Humanity had not just survived their exile, they had thrived beyond all expectations. They had built something magnificent in the void, something that dwarfed the achievements of the entire Galactic Council. And they had done it without asking for help from anyone. 2 years after humanity's departure, the galaxy faced its greatest threat in centuries. The Void Hunters had returned. They came from beyond the galactic rim, just as they had 300 years ago. Massive bioships that looked like living. Creatures moved through space, consuming everything in their path. Planets, space stations, entire civilizations. Nothing could stop them when they decided to feed. The first warnings came from the outer rim colonies. Distress signals spoke of black ships that seemed to grow larger as they devoured metal and flesh. Then the signals stopped coming entirely. In the Galactic Council chambers, emergency meetings ran day and night. Ports flooded in, of worlds going dark, of defense fleets being destroyed without slowing the enemy advance. Council. Leader Vexthera tried to project confidence, but her compound eyes showed fear. We have faced the Void Hunters before. We defeated them once, and we will defeat them again. But privately, everyone knew the truth. 3 centuries ago, it had taken the combined forces of dozens of species and 50 years of war to drive the Void Hunters away. That was when the galaxy was stronger, more united, and better prepared. Now, after 2 years of growing problems and conflicts, the Galactic Council was weaker than it had been in generations. The Void Hunter bioships adapted to every weapon used against them. Energy beams that destroyed the first ships were absorbed and reflected by the second wave. Kinetic weapons that worked initially became useless as the creatures evolved. Armor to deflect them. Admiral Krexther of the Defense Alliance coordinated the military response, but his reports grew more desperate each day. They're learning faster. Then we can develop new tactics. Every victory we achieve becomes meaningless within hours as they adapt to our methods. Within 3 months, the Void Hunters had consumed 17 star systems. They were moving steadily toward the core worlds, where most Council species lived. Evacuation plans were being made for the first time in galactic history. It was Counselor Corinth who finally spoke the words that many were thinking, but none wanted to say, "We need help. We need the humans." The Council chamber fell silent. After 2 years of insisting they could manage without humanity, the admission of need was painful for many to hear. Council leader Vexthera's mandibles clicked angrily. The humans abandoned us. They showed their true nature when they left without negotiating, without trying to find a solution. Why would they help us now? Because that's what humans do, Corinth replied quietly. They help people who need help, even people who have treated them badly. The debate continued for hours, but in the end, desperation won over pride. A formal request for aid was drafted and transmitted to the coordinates where the Human Federation had been discovered. The message was simple. The Galactic Council formally requests military assistance from the Human Federation against the Void Hunter incursion, threatening all civilized worlds. The response came back within 6 hours. Request denied. The Galactic Council chose to restrict human defensive preparations and military development. The consequences of those decisions belong to those who made them. The words hit the Council like physical blows. The humans were right. The Council had limited human military growth. had prevented them from building the kind of defenses that might have helped in this crisis. As Void Hunter forces pushed deeper into Council space, consuming more worlds each day, a desperate plan was formed. Counselor Corinth would lead a small diplomatic mission to the edge of human space, not to demand help, but to apologize. The mission consisted of 3 ships and included several council members who had opposed human restrictions from the beginning. They traveled to the barrier around human space and broadcast a message on all frequencies. This is Counselor Corinth of the Galactic Council. We come not as representatives of authority, but as individuals seeking forgiveness. We were wrong. We acted from fear instead of wisdom. We mistook your strength for aggression and your independence for hostility. For 3 days, there was no response. The small fleet waited at the barrier while reports came in of more worlds falling to the Void Hunters. Each day brought the enemy closer to the core systems. On the 4th day, Corinth tried again. We understand if you cannot forgive us. Understand if you choose to protect only yourselves. But the galaxy is dying, and we have nowhere else to turn. If there is any compassion left in humanity for the species that drove you away, please help us. Another day passed in silence. Then, on the 5th day, something appeared on their sensors that made the diplomatic crew gasp in amazement. Human ships were emerging from their territory. Not the small familiar vessels that the Council remembered, but massive warships of completely new design. They moved with impossible grace and speed, their hulls seeming to bend light around them. The lead ship opened a communication channel. This is Admiral Tony Martinez of the Human Federation Defense Force. We have received your message. Corinth's voice shook as he replied, Admiral Martinez, we are grateful that you would even speak with us, Counselor. Humanity protects all sentient life. This is our nature. It has not changed, regardless of how we have been treated. The human fleet moved past the diplomatic ships without stopping, heading directly toward the area where Void Hunter forces were advancing. Corinth ships followed at a distance, witnessing something that would be remembered for generations. The battle between human and Void Hunter forces lasted only 6 hours, but it was unlike anything ever seen before. Human weapons seemed to anticipate the Void Hunter's adaptations, changing tactics before the enemy could evolve counters. Human ships moved through space in patterns that defied physics, appearing and disappearing as if they could control space itself. The Void Hunter bioships, which had seemed unstoppable for months, were systematically destroyed or driven back, not through overwhelming force, but through tactics and technology that made their adaptive abilities irrelevant. When the battle ended, the Void Hunter incursion was over. The surviving enemy ships fled back beyond the galactic rim, just as they had 3 centuries earlier, but this time it had taken hours instead of decades. Admiral Martinez's voice came over the communication channel one final time. The immediate threat has been neutralized. Void Hunter forces are in full retreat. The core worlds are safe. Admiral Corinth called out, How can we thank you? How can we repay this debt? The response was quiet but firm. There is no debt between those who protect life and those who cherish it. But remember this, protection and cooperation are different things. The human ships began withdrawing toward their territory. Corinth tried to extend the conversation. Will you consider returning to the Council? Will you give us another chance? Admiral Martinez was silent for a long moment. Then the human Federation will always defend innocent life. But trust, once broken, must be rebuilt slowly. When the Galactic Council is ready to treat all species as equals rather than problems to be managed, we will talk again. The human fleet disappeared back into their territory, leaving the galaxy saved but humbled. In the months that followed, the Galactic Council underwent massive changes. New leadership was elected, with Counselor Corinth becoming the new council leader. The old policies of restriction and control were abandoned in favor of cooperation and mutual respect. A new council chamber was built, smaller and more humble than the old one. At the head of the table sat an empty chair with a simple plaque. reserved for the human Federation when they choose to return. Every council session now began with the same words: "We wait for our friends to come home." But in the depths of space, humanity continued building something greater than the council had ever imagined. They had learned that true strength came, not from the approval of others, but from staying true to their own values. And someday, when the galaxy had truly learned the difference between fear and wisdom, they might come home again, on their own terms, in their own time.